We're back in a conveniently timed outbreak of Epstein Mania. It's the Newsbusters podcast. I'm Tim Graham. With me today, MRC Free Speech America VP Dan Schneider and MRC-TV host Justine Brooke Murray. Thank you for coming.
Thanks for having us.
We wanted to start with Curtis Houck here is counting hundreds of minutes of network airtime on Epstein. Just broke out again last week, so conveniently after the Schumer shutdown ended. It waxes and it wanes, but it tends to be timed precisely to where the Democrats want it. So I guess the question, we'll start with you, Dan, in terms of how is it that the House Oversight Committee doesn't matter until they have Epstein documents?
So, Tim, you mentioned that it was, after the shutdown came to an end. It was nanoseconds after the shutdown came to an end. Even by Washington standards, it was a bit dizzying how fast the Democrats flipped the script and pivoted to Epstein again, which is, of course, their original strategy for re-election. Now that the Schumer shutdown is no longer, a foil for them, they've gone to Epstein, and this is going to backfire on them because we all know that Epstein and all his pals were of the left. I've never understood why they were making Epstein their campaign tactic when Epstein's colleagues were all lefties.
Well, you're right. And this is what you'll even forget that Donald Trump in this vintage 20 years ago was a Manhattan developer hanging out with the Clintons, had Katie Couric and stuff to his wedding. He was a different cat back then. And yeah, I think the question we always start with was, if there's hundreds of minutes of focusing on Trump and Epstein, how many minutes, and we're not counting this because, how many minutes do they're spending on Bill Clinton? Because there's a lot more evidence there. But, Justine, what's funny about all of this is the way that the media thinks, well, we're going to be serious and sober and do hard news. But they, on the other hand, they're like, well, this stuff rates. People want to talk about this. This is exciting stuff. What happens to, victimized young women?
Yeah, they never wanted to talk about it until Biden was out of office. Yeah. And people on the right continue to point out the obvious, that the Biden administration, that they could have released the files all along. Why didn't they? Why didn't the media press them on it? And of course, suddenly they're huge proponents of releasing the files, when previously it almost seemed like they were angry every time a person on the right brought it up when Biden was president. And now they're using the whole Epstein debacle as a crutch, basically. The Epstein shtick, it's like the new racist. Anytime someone on the right says something conservative, or we talk about a great policy President Trump is working on, they'll come back and say, well, Epstein this, Epstein that. It's the new, just call everyone racist or call everyone a Nazi.
Yeah, and it's the way that everybody says this, and it gets tiring when they're like, Epstein is a distraction from the shutdown, but Trump's military actions in Venezuela, or potential military actions in Venezuela, are a distraction from Epstein. And we all go around and around. But yeah, Dan, this is the thing that is kind of amazing, is that this never came up with the Biden Department of Justice. And I don't think we should argue that the Biden Department of Justice wasn't interested in ruining Trump. That seemed to be their entire game. So I'm sitting here smiling going, maybe Hunter Biden's in the Epstein files. So they didn't want to touch it, and now they can.
We can talk about the politics of Epstein, and that's certainly an interesting thing. It's also important to remember that this beast of a human being and his ally, Giselle, or what's her name? Ghislaine Maxwell, how wretched and horrible they were. And all of the horrible people who flew on the Lolita Express to that island to rape and abuse young people. And I want every single one of those people held to account. Every person who flew to that island and engaged in predatory, illegal, criminal conduct, I want them to be exposed. Yeah. And I want them to pay the appropriate penalty for what they did, which is not only criminal, but for these young girls and their families to be able to sue these wretched, and I'm using words here that qualify under FCC standards, even though we're not subject to those, but we're a family channel.
Yes.
They need to pay the price.
Yes, this is something that both parties should be able to agree on, which is, powerful men should not be trafficking 16-year-old girls for sex and dragging them to some Caribbean island. I mean, it's gross. I mean, that's an easy word for it. So that part is easy. It's just the matter of the way that it gets just exploited for partisan gain in either way.
Exactly. It's used as political football to the point where it's reduced to basically a meme. And it's really unfair to the girls. As you mentioned, it actually is a distraction from how evil these people were. And we just reduce it all to some internet football. Yeah,
and they blacked out the name of Virginia Giuffre.
Well, I mean, the Democrats who right, the Oversight Committee has all these documents. The Democrats then, right after the Schumer shutdown came to an end, the Democrats then cherry-picked a couple of the emails and decided to black out one name, and they replaced that name with literally the word victim, when that individual is the one who is on the record saying that Donald Trump never did anything inappropriate, that he never engaged in any of these horrible acts of violence against girls. And the Democrats know all of this. They deceived the media, but I think, look, the media wanted to be deceived on this. They wanted to tell the Democrat story to harm Trump.
And the weirdest possible part of this is how they are suddenly trying to use Epstein as a character witness against Trump. It's like, if that isn't the most ridiculous thing, is to try to say, Jeffrey Epstein said Trump was a bad guy. Excuse me?
When it's Donald Trump who years ago said, Epstein's a bad guy, and banned Epstein from Mar-a-Lago and other Trump-related activities.
So I watched Saturday Night Live on the DVR with the wife, and it's just like they could not get enough of this weekend. So the whole show starts with a very awful, badly done Carolyn Levitt press conference about Epstein. And then they had 3 skits, pre-recorded skits of MacGruber, where MacGruber finds that he's on the Epstein list, so he keeps blowing everyone up so that they can't see him in the Epstein files. I'm like, why do you make 3 of those? The first one wasn't funny. Then you get to Weekend Update, and there's a whole set of Epstein jokes in the Weekend Update. This was one of the dumbest ones. In one of the emails, Epstein's brother asked if Vladimir Putin has a picture of Donald Trump giving oral sex to someone named Bubba, which was an old nickname for Bill Clinton. So I guess that's one job Trump has created. So, this is why you release documents like this, where they're just basically making jokes. I'm going to guess that Bubba here was MAGA, that, it was Trump supposedly making love to his MAGA fans. But I mean, it's that sort of smear where it's like, yeah, Bill Clinton's the guy that is guiltier in this thing, and they're making jokes about Trump and Clinton this way. The Weekend Update's just a horrible, horrible excuse for comedy.
They also, SNL stopped being funny like about 10 years ago.
Oh, about the time Trump came in.
Yeah, exactly. And now their shtick is stale. Like, that's how you know they have no material. They don't even know what they're doing, that they're just regurgitating the same worn-out joke for their entire show. It's kind of pathetic.
Yeah, I mean, when you think about them preparing for the show each week, you're in a leftist bubble. And so your idea of what a joke is and your idea of what's funny is everybody's going to outdo themselves in the how evil is Trump. Yeah. And that's what you end up with. Then there was Meet the Press. We go to the next thing, Meet the Press. Dan, Senator John Barrasso of Wyoming was on with Kristen Welker. And she wanted to ask him about Epstein, and he changed the subject, at least in his answer, to something called Arctic frost. Let's take a look at the clip.
I fully believe that had there been something here that the Biden administration could have used to go after President Trump the last 4 years, they'd have gone after him with double barrels. But this is an administration, the Biden administration, which abused justice. They have gone after 8 United States senators, spied on them, went after their phone records, targeted them. Well, so they have abused the laws of the land, and I think they would have gone after President Trump if there was anything there. To me, this Epstein matter, as well as the shutdown, they're trying to get out of the pain they've caused the country, the shutdown, and that's why the Democrats want to use this, and they want to make President Trump a lame duck president.
So his main point was, in Arctic Frost, was that the Biden DOJ, which wasn't weaponized at all against Republicans,
Totally not.
was collecting phone records on 8 or 9 or 10 Senate Democrats. And the media's like, well, we're not going to pay any attention to that because being weaponized against Republicans is what they do.
Well, not just the 8 or 9 Republicans in Congress, but hundreds of elected officials, all Republicans nationwide. Arctic Frost was a massive effort specifically targeting Republicans, exclusively Republicans, who were simply exercising their rights under the law to contest an election. Let's keep in mind what the underlying claim is, that Donald Trump was trying to contest the outcome of the 2020 election. This is what happens in every election, whether dog catcher on up to president, when it's close. Yeah. People contest. They say, I want a recount. And of course, in many states, a recount is mandatory if it's within like a half percentage point, and then discretionary if it's more than a percent, half a point. This is lawful. This is consistent with democracy, to have your day in court if you think that something happened incorrectly. And Biden's DOJ tried to then criminalize lawful democratic processes simply because they hate Donald Trump.
And, we all remember, some of us remember, the year 2000, when the Democrats were the ones saying rigged, cheated.
And contesting the election.
Yeah.
Also,
and wouldn't recognize the result for months afterwards.
And offered different slates of electors. This is what Hillary Clinton did in 2016.
Yeah.
And it was lawful. She had the right to do that. When Donald Trump tried to do the same thing, they tried to criminalize him.
Justine, were you born yet in 2000? I forget.
I think I was 3.
Okay.
or actually, maybe I was 2. I'm trying. My memory right now is probably as good as Joe Biden's.
I was counting Chads in that election.
You were on the team.
I was working it. Yeah.
Yeah. Well, I mean, it was one of those things where Bush was ahead by 1,500, and then suddenly he was ahead by 300. How did that happen? So, I mean, but that was much, much closer than the recent elections. Kamala Harris likes to think that that was the closest election in years.
It was her coronation.
She lost. She still can't accept it. But, this goes to the other thing, and that is in terms of the Sunday morning shows. The Washington Post had a story that newly released documents appear to show convicted sex offender Jeffrey Epstein was texting with Delegate Stacey Plaskett of the Virgin Islands. Now, why is that relevant? Because Epstein Island is right off. It's between St. Thomas and St. John in the Virgin Islands. So clearly, Delegate Plaskett and Epstein he was texting her. There was a hearing in 2019 with Michael Cohen, the old Trump lawyer, and he's texting her about what to ask Michael Cohen. And this is, again, where you're going, okay, so here's a Democrat who's, to use Dan Rather's phrase, tick tight with Epstein, and none of the Sunday morning shows mention any of this, even though they obsessed over Epstein.
Of course,
yeah. And just to make sure, texting, not just suggesting questions she should ask. They were the questions she asked. It was Jeffrey Epstein asking questions.
He was the puppeteer.
Through this member of Congress.
Oh. Well, I mean, we always have to remember these things that maybe not everybody knows, which is, yes, delegates are members of Congress, but they really don't get to vote, or their votes don't really count.
Okay. Well, they get every single right and privilege as any one of the other 435 members of Congress, except for a final vote on the floor of the House. And I know this may sound strange, may sound weird, but frankly, the least important thing a member of Congress does is vote for final passage on the floor of the House. All the real work takes place in advance of that. So these, I think there are 6 of these delegates, whether it's U.S. Virgin Islands or Guam or American Samoa, Puerto Rico.
D.C.
they get to serve as committee chairman or ranking members. They're on all the committee assignments. They can introduce legislation. They vote in committee. They do everything except final passage on the floor of the House.
Yeah, which reminds me, Eleanor Holmes Norton, that this is the next case of your time is over. Please go away. And she's just a delegate, but I mean, she clearly is in mental decline. I want to turn to a cultural issue now. This kind of struck me over the weekend on the Bill Maher program. And the guest in this particular clip was Scott Galloway, who tech watchers know. He's one of those left-wing hacks who has a podcast with Kara Swisher. But in this case, they were discussing something that should be interesting to all of us, and that is the current dating scene between young men and young women. Let's take a look.
The number one thing men are afraid of is girls.
Yeah.
It's not lightning. It's girls.
Yeah.
It's just, there's something about that rejection of going up to somebody, like you say, cold, and you just have to get through that. And I feel like we are further from that than ever. I mean, kids don't even want to answer the phone.
Yeah.
They find that a little too alarming, unless you text first.
40.
Really, because that's passive, because you answer, nobody sees you, they don't see your reaction, you don't have to come up with conversation.
100%. 45% of men 18 to 24 have never asked a woman out in person. 63% of men under the age of 30 are not even pursuing a relationship. And if you think about the most rewarding things in your life, I mean, the things that really matter, they are essentially relationships. And what do they all have in common? They're really damn hard.
Now, I don't want to cast any aspersions on the young men I know, like my nephews and others, who don't date a lot. But I think there's clearly something going on here. What do you think?
Yeah. Well, why men don't want to date us?
Well, you're pretty intimidating.
I know. Oh, I try. Actually, Dan here is my matchmaker, my Jewish matchmaker.
I am?
He's because guilty, I'm single still too. And I kind of understand this phenomenon. I think it's affecting both young men and women. And they even say in the clip, they mention social media and that we're so used to communicating behind a screen now. No one wants to pick up the phone and actually talk to each other. You text. And if you don't like someone, guilty, you ghost them, which basically means you leave them on red, or you don't respond, or you pretend you didn't see their message. So our ways of communicating, they've been so corrupted with a giant screen in front of us. And especially, we were brought up, my generation, we were raised by people who made our culture all about ourselves and me, myself, my feelings. So this idea that dating someone and then eventually marrying someone, it means you're going to have to compromise and live your life with another person. And we're not used to that anymore because our teachers, our professors, our celebrities have basically drummed into the heads of young men and women that it's all about us. It's all about what we want to do. Young men are taught that women are just all a bunch of nasty feminists, but at the same time, women my age were raised to be a bunch of angry feminists, and it's kind of this back and forth. It has this zigzag effect where it's so divisive because now you have a bunch of men who see women all one way, and you have a bunch of women who think all men are oppressive.
Well, in my particular case, I mean, I found my college girlfriend at 20 and married her at 24. So I didn't do a lot of dating as a young man. I kind of skipped the whole scene. But I know that the fear of rejection is big.
You did not skip the most important part. You found your wife.
Yes. Yes, but I did it early.
Yeah, look, okay, so, consistent with what Justine was saying, but on the flip side, men in recent years have been taught that masculinity is toxic. And part of this masculinity is making the first move, asking a young woman out. But they've been told that that's bad. Toxic masculinity is terrible. And then on the connected to that is what big tech is doing, which is creating an alternative universe. Men, you cannot function the way men have for thousands of years, but instead there is this universe, this this digital universe where you can be as ugly and horrible as you want.
Yeah, I mean, and that's where it is funny, the idea that people can't talk in person. I just find that really amazing. That's where oh, color me old. I have no idea. And yeah, I certainly know that people would rather text than talk to you on the phone. And then it's like they misinterpret your text. I like to talk to people instead of emailing because people can read the text and go, "You sounded angry." And it's like, well, if you actually heard my voice, it wouldn't sound that way at all. But it's just, to me, it's sort of sad because people are ready when they're 24, 25 to date. They're ready to get married. But this is, again, part of it all is also economic. It's like, it just feels really hard to buy a house. When you just try to plan your life, we're at a place right now where young men and women have affordability problems. So I don't know exactly what the answer is, but you certainly want to say, I guess my advice for young men is, if you want to be manly enough to be willing to accept a no. Even a humiliating no. I think that's the hard part. It's tough out there, I'm sure. And again, everybody who's tried a dating site knows, the first problem you have is, well, I looked at you. I don't like the look of you.
Or you edit your pictures and it's a huge catfish.
But look, it's far worse than all of that. We've got these robots that are being built so that human beings no longer have to interact with others in any sort of dating or marital situation. They're sex robots. They're slaves. That is, and you have some people like Elon Musk who are excited about this opportunity.
Because he has enough babies out of wedlock, he's going to try something different.
But it's a hedonistic world.
Yeah.
And this is really, really dangerous for humanity. I'm not including procreation, but no, who are we as human beings? This is big tech destroying humanity. This is a really dangerous thing.
And it gives us the illusion that we can avoid any consequences. People go to these sex robots because they know that if they engage with that, there's not going to be a kid or there's nothing's. They think that there's going to be no real effects, but the problem is you're going to have long-term harm. Yeah,
I mean, again, it's like the most important thing in lives a lot is your relationship and having a permanent relationship. And when you get to a certain age and the kids are out of the house, that's it. That's your relationship. So I think that's something that young people should look forward to, in my humble opinion. Let's turn to another cultural issue. We had this weird thing last week where Katie Couric was trying to ask Senator Fetterman, that if it was unseemly that Charlie Kirk got a spot on Air Force, the casket of Charlie Kirk got a space on Air Force Two. The Charlie Kirk assassination isn't very old, and yet they're already sort of trying to change the whole subject. Mm-hmm. So when they had a Turning Point event in Berkeley last week, the protests were extremely violent. That wasn't news. And of course, but the right-wingers, we were going to pick up, this was funny, a demonstrator named Jihad was charged with assault and robbery at the scene. You talked about that.
That was the second jihadist named Jihad to commit jihad within the past 2 months. The first time it was on Yom Kippur in Europe, in the UK, I believe.
Yes.
And the second time was just last week. You have this guy, this time he was targeting a Christian supporter of Charlie Kirk. You had a man there, he was wearing a cross, he was preaching about Jesus, and he was out there, he was attending the event, he was selling merchandise, and he was brutally beaten for it by this jihadi. And nobody covered it except for us at the MRC. And then there was like one local paper, I believe the New York Post covered it.
Yep.
And then you had CBS, a local CBS affiliate. I guess Barry Weiss has to investigate these guys because they basically said, they recycled their mostly peaceful line.
Yes, they did. That's right. I saw that video.
Jihad was mostly peacefully committed. Meanwhile, as the lady was saying this, of course, you had fires in the back. You had leftists setting fire to the street in the background. I think a car was set on fire. And it's just rinse and repeat. And what they're really telling us is that deep down, what Katie Couric is essentially saying deep down is that the murder of Charlie, murdering people because they're conservatives or don't align with the left, it's somehow justified. And even if they don't outright say that, that's their hint, hint, wink, wink.
Well, I mean, I think what they're objecting to on some level, I think, if I'm trying to be really nice, is it's like, just because he was brutally murdered doesn't mean you have to say nice things afterwards. And it's sort of like, but this, to some degree, is what we do when somebody is shot. You know, that's like saying you don't have to say nice things about Martin Luther King or John F. Kennedy. You still can't say negative things about those guys.
So, Tim, we just went through the whole BBC firing scandal where the BBC was caught completely doctoring what Donald Trump had said to manufacture the story that he was actually encouraging people to go and riot and destroy the Capitol. And so the two top people at the BBC got fired. There's frankly no difference between intentionally doctoring a quote like that and distorting the news otherwise. And that's what we see, where the news completely distorts what really happened to Charlie Kirk, what happened at this protest. They will not cover how it's these radical left-wing billionaires that are funding these sorts of things. You know, this is a sin being committed by media very widely and broadly and consistently. And there is a day of reckoning coming in the media.
Well,
because this is not serving the American interest.
There is a bit of a reckoning at the BBC right now, and of course it's gotten to the point where it's given more heft again to having the BBC face what we've been able to achieve in the United States, and that is let's take away the government funding for the BBC. But you know what we have. I got to break this out just for you, Dan. You have people like the NPR media reporter, you know, David Folkenflik, and Stelter running around saying, you know, we got to protect the Beeb, you know, and it's like Folkenflik couldn't get enough of the scandal of News of the World, the tabloid, the Murdoch tabloid in London. He did a lot on that story, but now they're all just purely on defense in this case when they're clearly, the BBC was clearly guilty of just a savage edit of Trump.
I know you communicate with Folkenflik from time to time. He responded to one of my tweets recently when I mentioned how NPR and PBS were serial lawbreakers, refusing to comply with the law. And I think he was honest in his tweet back at me, like, what are you talking about? Like, Tim, how many times, I mean, countless times, we explained to members of Congress and their staff and publicly that by statute, the BBC, the NPR and PBS have a statutory obligation to, and I'm quoting the statute, ensure strict adherence to objectivity and balance in all programs and series of programs of a controversial nature. That is the statutory requirement. If you want government funding, then there are certain grant requirements. This is true whether you're a media outlet or otherwise. NPR and PBS had to maintain objectivity, and they refused. They broke the law. The BBC also has a statutory obligation, and they have refused. This is why the BBC will lose its government funding one day.
I mean, several of our cultural issues. It's not just this, but it's also Gaza. They're just horrifically biased against Israel.
They were accused of having freelancers invade with Hamas on October 7th. And yet it's all turned around. It's all twisted. The British people are guilt-tripped into believing that it's their responsibility and they're supposed to pay. They're supposed to basically throw out their wallets so BBC can basically be a Hamas mouthpiece. They had a rule there that you couldn't even say Hamas was a terrorist organization. They had to treat them with kid gloves. And then when this latest peace deal came into fruition, they immediately took essentially took Hamas's side, because they would say things like, well, Hamas really didn't get a fair deal. How does this make Hamas feel? As if they're just a bunch of Boy Scouts who are really being unfairly shut out. I mean, we're talking about a primitive, savage terrorist organization. But then you see who works at the BBC. I believe at least one executive had very anti-Semitic tweets. Didn't even use the word Israel. Just went straight for the Jews.
Well, I mean, it's that, and it's also there's this sort of proof also on the gender identity front, where they've just been ridiculously biased. But I think on the Israel thing in particular, they actually make NPR and PBS look weak by comparison. It's just that bad.
Look, I'm looking at Steve Inskeep right now. He is the worst at NPR. I could go into example after example, but he is the most anti-Semitic reporter at NPR, in my opinion. They have NPR and Steve Inskeep have continued to rerun this particular show where he has this radical left-wing professor on to say that Israel is engaged in genocide because Israel has asked people to move out of buildings for their own protection before they blow up the buildings. These buildings are military sites, and because Israel destroyed those buildings, thus people cannot return to those buildings later. That is the new definition of genocide, according to NPR.
Yeah, I mean, they really do sort of want to underline for people that Israel's genocidal, and it just, again, it's like it's such a relief that at least for the moment, we have succeeded in getting their taxpayer funding removed. Thank you to the president and the Republicans. So, and they're on the Epstein thing too, because that's what they do. And so to track all of that, that's why you have to come to Newsbusters once, twice, 24 times a day. Thanks for listening and watching.